IWC have just added to their Ingenieur line. I've got it here, so let's check it out. Given the massive hype and coverage, the huge coverage that the relaunch of the Ingenieur had back last year, you're probably well aware of the history around this watch. It's one of the watches that legendary watch designer Gerald Genta designed alongside the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. IWC first launched the Ingenieur range back in 1955, but it wasn't until 1979 when Gerald Genta designed this. In 2023, IWC relaunched this line with a handful of colors. We had a silver dial, a black dial, an aqua dial, and then a titanium watch as well. This is their new blue dial. Now, typically when brands relaunch or redesign modern versions of a vintage watch, it's usually thicker and beefier, but that's not the case with the Ingenieur. This is actually 1.2 millimeters thinner and 11 millimeters shorter lug to lug than the original version, making this version so much more wearable. The specifications are exactly the same between this and the other Ingenieurs that were launched last year. The case is 40 millimeters wide, it's 10.8 millimeters thick. We have a screw down crown and it's 100 meters water resistance. The case is 54.7 millimeters lug to lug, but the actual lug to lug, when you include the bracelet, is 49 millimeters. We have a more flat sapphire crystal compared to most IWC watches, and it has the anti-reflective coating on the top side and on the underside. I do wish all brands would stop putting anti-reflective coating on the top side because it does scratch and it does mark, but it just goes against the idea of sapphire crystal. The big benefit, and I know this is a very niche benefit, but the big benefit of having a flat sapphire crystal is it makes it so much easier to photograph and take videos of. When it's domed, it makes it so tricky. Now the dial has this grid pattern that's stamped into soft iron, and then it has this blue PVD coating put on top. Now the soft iron part of this watch is actually quite important. That kind of goes back to the heritage of the Ingenieur, which is supposed to be a purposeful watch, a watch for engineers and a watch for scientists, people who might be close to large magnetic fields. And it's a soft iron cage which the movement sits in, which gives this watch its anti-magnetic properties. The movement side is the same as the other Ingenieurs. It's IWC caliber 32111. It's an automatic movement with bi-directional winding. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, has 21 joules, and has a massive 120 hours. That's a 5-day power reserve. And that all sits within a soft iron cage, which is pretty impressive considering how thin this watch is, at 10.8 millimeters thick. The price is £10,100, which is a huge amount of money, and when IWC relaunched the Ingenieur, that was a big contentious point, which I understand. A lot of you guys, similar to me, we've been into watches for quite a while. We can remember when the Speedmaster was a £3,500 watch, or when the Submariner was a £5,000 watch. The Speedmaster is over £7,000, and the Submariner date is now a £9,000 watch. So £10,000 is expensive for this watch, but when you compare this price to the current prices of watches, which is just expensive, I do think this watch is £1,100 better than a Submariner. There's so many aspects of value and pricing, taste and design, branding, and the value that you put on those things. But when you just compare like for like, product for product, the finishing of this watch is far superior to a Submariner. I know this is going to be a contentious part. I love the Speedmaster and I love the Submariner. If you follow the channel, you know how much I love those watches. But I kind of feel like we have to give credit where credit is due. Watches are just expensive now. So yes, £10,000 is a huge amount of money, but when you get hands-on with this watch and you feel the engineering of the bracelet, you feel the design, you feel the finishing of the watch, there are so many elements that are superior to watches below it, and so it just makes sense for that price. On that point of pricing and what you're getting, there are a few things that I want to note. The bracelet is a heavily engineered bracelet. It's so intricate, it's beautifully tapered. It goes from 25 millimeters at the case down to 18 millimeters, so it is a really nicely tapered bracelet. And then the center links, it's not just flat across all the links. The center links are humped, and then everything has a brushed finish, but then all the edges are chamfered, the center links included. And then there's a couple of little finishing Easter eggs in there as well. We've got a little bit of perlage within the inner clasp, and it's details like that which I think are really smart. Little negative things that I would like to see added to the watch perhaps. For this price, there should be some kind of bracelet extension system. IWC bracelets are heavily engineered. They are really very clever with these little buttons to remove the links rather than having to unscrew screws that are impossible to unscrew. And so I feel like if there's that level of engineering going on, they should be able to figure out how to put in a bracelet extension system. on this clasp. Another thing that I'd like to see, and I know this isn't possible given the format of this watch because it has a soft iron cage, but I really want to see a display case back. I know that goes against the whole idea of the soft iron cage, because if there was a display case back, you would just see a flat piece of soft iron. But there's other technologies out there that allow a movement to be anti-magnetic without the need of the soft iron cage. I feel like a display case back would add to the luxury of this watch, the elegance of this watch. Show off that movement inside, because IWC do talk about how the movement is highly finished, but I want to see it. Now, a separate random thing to note, IWC call this the Ingenieur 40. In line with all other naming conventions for IWC, that would imply that there's going to be other sizes to the Ingenieur. I would really like to see an even more vintage version. They used to do a line of quartz versions, which were really thin, like a 38mm quartz version that was really thin. Love to see them do a super thin, vintage-inspired matte black dial or matte white dial that is just super thin and just a bit more dainty, perhaps. I do like the size and the feel of this watch. I feel like it wears more like a 39mm, so something even smaller than that and just a bit more, maybe two-tone. Two-tone with a matte black dial would be sick. Anyway, guys, that is the new IWC Ingenieur with the blue dial. Drop a comment down below and let me know what you think of this. I'd love to know your thoughts on the pricing. Given what I mentioned about the pricing of other popular watches and how this sits, how do you feel about that pricing? I haven't mentioned any of my products. I sell watch straps and watch accessories over at barkandjack.com. I'm wearing my Mark 20 on our nice brown ribbed nylon strap. You can get them over at barkandjack.com. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you like the style of this video, then hit the subscribe button down there and that little bell icon so you get notifications when I drop a new video. If you're on Instagram, give me a follow at barkandjack, and I'll see you guys very soon. Take care.